Hello, Blitz Kids students. This is Coach Russell again, and today we're going to be working on black openings. And this black opening, I've taught it for the last 10 years and have been real successful in scholastic play. And so basically, the way the game starts, um, usually white always starts off with e4, and we will play pawn to e5, also controlling the center, right? If your opponent plays knight f3, as you can tell, they are attacking your e5 pawn. I believe the best way to defend here would be by playing your knight to c6. So now your pawn is well defended. Now here, your opponent, most of your opponents play bishop to c4 because obviously they know that they have to go over your weak square, which is f7. Now, by playing bishop c4, it creates a name of an opening. I'm going to give you some time to see if you guys remember the name of the opening. That's right, it is called the Italian game. Now, here I always tell my students to answer back also with bishop to c5 because it also goes towards f2 as well, their weak pawn. And now here white has plenty of choices. They can play pawn to d3, knight c3, they can castle. Most students castle because they're taught to castle and keep their king safe. And then I like to play pawn to d6. The reason for pawn to d6 is right away my bishop is able to come out and play, and the whole point of pawn d6 is if they don't play h3, I can play my bishop to g4. So let's say my opponent plays knight c3, which in a lot of the games they do play knight c3, and we can just easily play bishop to g4. And also by playing bishop to g4, we have created what's called a pin. This is a relative pin. White can still move the knight, but if the knight moves, as you can see, the bishop will then capture the queen. So a lot of opponents don't like their knight being pinned, so they play h3. Now they're putting the question to the bishop. They're telling the bishop, run away or capture. But I always think before I move. Now, if I capture, they have two choices to capture. They can capture with the g2 pawn or the d1 queen. And if you notice, if the pawn takes, they weaken their king side. So more than likely, queen will capture. And now they're threatening checkmate on f7. But what if I told you you don't run away or you don't capture? What if I told you just to play h5? Because a lot of beginners tend to get very greedy, okay? And right away they see a bishop. Well, a bishop is 3 points, a pawn is 1 point. So of course they go for the trade. You capture, and without even realizing it, this rook has developed, even though you have not moved it. The reason it's developed is because it has a open file directly towards the king. Now my pawn is attacking the knight, and I know my rook cannot get a checkmate by himself, so I need help getting checkmate. So a lot of opponents will play knight to h2, putting pressure on your pawn that's on g4. And now here you can play queen to h4, threatening checkmate on h2. Now, if knight takes the pawn, then you can easily just play queen to h1 checkmate. And if your opponent plays queen captures g4, then you can easily just play queen captures h2 checkmate. So opponents more than likely will play rook to e1 because if queen captures, the king is able to run away, and if you check them, the king's able to escape. So here is a very, very important move. A lot of people, we do see that we're attacking f2, and a lot of students will want to capture with the bishop. Um, I think no, it is best to capture with the queen, because you are forcing the king to the corner, and also into checkmate, because now you're going to play rook captures h2, and these are all forcing moves. As you notice, I'm putting him in check, and now there's a checkmate in 1. Now the way I find checkmate in 1s is I see where my king is able to go. Right now the only square the king is able to go is to h1. So how can I check the king and also attack h1? Well, queen to h4, checkmate. Notice the queen defends this and this diagonal, and then the g1 square is actually defended by your bishop on c5. Okay, so this is one of the tricks. The other one is a little bit different, almost identical to the puzzle that we just did. The second one starts off with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4, bishop to c5, castles, d6, knight c3, bishop to g4. Now, so far, everything looks very identical, and we're going to go over if our opponent plays pawn to d3. We went over h3, and we said that the best move was to defend the bishop. Now, if they play pawn to d3, if you remember the Chess Kid videos, what did it say about pins? We put pressure on the pin piece. So, what move can we add pressure on the knight on f3? Give you guys some time to think. And if you got knight to d4, you are correct. Knight to d4 adds additional pressure on the pin piece. Now, because they see the pin and that you're putting pressure, they will play h3, attacking the bishop. And here, I like to capture with the knight, because now the queen cannot capture. Because if queen captures, the bishop can easily just capture back. So now pawn captures, and notice the king side is broken down. So now we look for hanging pieces. I see my bishops attacking here and here, but the pawn here is defended on f3. So I will go for the pawn on h3 by playing bishop captures h3. And now if you notice, I'm attacking the rook, and the king side is very, very weak. Now, a lot of kids will end up moving the rook to e1 because they're taught that, of course, that a bishop is 3 points, a rook is 5 points, so it's not a very good trade. Now here, we want to bring some extra help and start attacking the king side. Now, if you notice, the queen and the bishop are attacking f2, and so a lot of the times they're going to defend the f2 pawn. So I've seen kids play rook to e2, I've seen queen to e2, and so we're going to go over those two, and then we're also going to go over bishop to e3. So if rook plays e2, who can find the best move here? Go ahead and pause your videos and see if you're able to find checkmate in 2. Alright, and if you said queen to g5, you are not correct, because if you notice, the bishop is attacking g5. There's a reason I didn't go to queen g5 first, because of the bishop. And I cannot play g4 because of the pawn. But if you did say queen to g3, you're correct. Notice that this pawn cannot capture the queen because of the bishop on c5 pinning the pawn. So now the king is forced to move to h1, and now queen can easily play g2, checkmate. Now if your opponent plays queen e2, well, the same thing applies, guys. You can easily just play queen to g3, check. Pawn still cannot take because of the bishop on c5 pinning the pawn. This is called an absolute pin. So before we had a relative pin where the pin piece could move. On an absolute pin, the pin piece absolutely cannot move because it'll put the king in check, and it's illegal to put our king in check. So king goes to h1 and queen to g2, checkmate. Now let's look at when bishop plays e3. Now if your queen plays g3, the pawn can capture because now the bishop defends the pin. So here I believe the best move would just simply be bishop captures e3, and now you're threatening queen to g5. So let's say they capture with the rook, you can just easily play queen g5 check. Your opponent then plays king to h1 or h2, and now we play queen to g2, checkmate. So fairly simple, guys. Just gotta remember, if your opponent castles early, just remember to push d6, hold off on knight f6, especially if they're falling into this trap. Remember, this is a very successful scholastic play opening. So if you go to chess tournaments and you're playing black, this is an opening that I've seen a lot of students win with this trap. Okay, guys? So those are the two traps that I wanted to show you for black, guys. Remember to continue watching videos and practicing your openings, your tactics, checkmate threats in 1, 2, and believe me, guys, you guys will get better by watching these videos and also practicing these openings like the scholars made, and anything is always a good help. Alright, guys, so thank you very much for watching, guys. That is it for the black traps, and if you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave some comments below and we'll be more than happy to answer them. Alright, guys, take care and have a good one.